Okay, I gave a lot of thought to how I wanted the background to be. This is it's the final point, and it's the point at which a painting can either be made or ruined or just mediocre. I want it to have a lot of blue in it, and I hope to almost blend some of this blue into the sky. I've decided to make it a scene where she's on a hillside over a valley, a sort of abstract kind of valley done in blues, and where the sky is in the blues and dark, and there were storm clouds, but there is light there. So I'm going to begin. I've indicated the general indication of the valley, and I do have a photo that I want to look at on my computer for that. So I have 4 photos. I'm often never satisfied with one, and we'll transition from one to another to decide which elements. Now I've already indicated the top of the puppies. I don't want any talking over there. Quiet. So I'm going to indicate very lightly and blend this in a bit, the far away blues of the valley. And the very, very far away hills in the distance. Hills in the distance will often have a very blue cast to them, and I could put a little bit of violet in there, but this time, given that I'm wanting most of this area to be very blue, I'm just going to leave those indications of blue down there. And for this, I'm using my cerulean blue, which has a nice greenish cast to it, and I'm bringing it down into this area. I'm leaving some spaces here and there, as if there could be some fields, some trees, and I'm being loose about that. And as we get a little bit closer to the foreground, there'll be a little more indication of, and so there could be some tree areas, some fields. I'm not going to put a lot of detail in here, but as we move down into the foreground, I'm going to use that wonderful kind of cascade green. It's a very dark bluish green to transition to that, so that the viewer does know that that is land and not water, but I don't want to overdo it. So I'm going to continue on down with my cerulean blue and just throw in some abstract green here and there, not too much. So now I'm going to put in some of that green. It's a very, very dark blackish green. and it gives the impression of evergreen trees. And I'm going to blend that into the cape, so I'm going to bring it right over to the cape, and because then I will have some lost edges on that cape, which I'd like to have. Right. To me, that cape is just a bit too much defined. And for that, so I'm just softening that edge with the adjacent color, letting them blend together a bit there. There. I think that's pretty much. I'm going to do a slight amount of that green up in here, very subtle, barely a light wash over some of the blue there. I think I'll leave that as that is and come over to this side and put some of that cerulean blue down here. Same as on the other side. Very light wash, some spaces, and do the same thing. Let that cape have some lost edges. Blend it in with the background a little bit. Soften the edge, because when I re-wet the edge of the cape a little bit, it some of the color reconstitutes. Now I have to be careful not to overdo it, but I do want some bleeding of the colors here like this. Okay. And then I'll just go around with my paper towel to make sure that there's no pools of water that can bleed into the painting and make a bloom. There. So, from my point of view, this foreground is just about ready. I'll just put a little more intense blue in over here on this edge here. Just to give that a little more definition as the land, and then maybe bring in slightly more color with a slightly bit of, not much, but a slightly bit of phthalo blue to tone down the cerulean a little bit and indicate that it's land a little more so. I have to be careful not to do too much, because yeah. A little more of the cerulean. And then with a damp brush, just blending in some faraway mountains back there. very lightly. Okay. Cleaning the edge. Just that cleaning of the edge isn't because I want my tape to be perfectly clean, but only so that water will not pool back into the paper and create a bloom. As the paper will always rise up a little into the white wet area, and that will make some color run off the sides and pool here in these spaces. And that pooling, when that dries, then can come back in and make a bloom mark in the painting. Okay, so we've got some nice softened edges here on the cape. Hopefully not too much, but let's see. I can always come in and define them a little bit more if I need to. I made a little bit of a smudge there, so I just have to fix that smudge. Okay. And every time you touch something that has a lot of color on it with some water, you can lift the color off, and that's what I just did there, and I don't really want that to happen. I'm just showing some kind of evergreen marks here, lightly. Some evergreen marks, very lightly. Carrying some of that down here. And then we had that edge of the cape. I don't want it completely lost, so I'll just lightly put it back. And some of it will be blending in a little bit because now the two wet sides are next to each other. Okay, I think I haven't quite overworked that yet, so let's hope not. There. I think that's the beginning of a hillside. There's a mark here that has to be blended a little. It looks too defined. I don't want that. Yeah, okay, good. All right, so we have land. I hope you can tell that that's land. And I'm going to put the beginning of a gray sky. Some gray clouds on the horizon. And I'm using a little bit of what's called Payne's Gray for that. If you don't have Payne's Gray in your palette, you can just mix together some ivory black with some cobalt blue, and that will give you a nice transparent Payne's Gray. So I want the base of those clouds to be very soft and gray and have a bluish cast to them. Okay. And in the middle, I just want the slightest amount of color, barely, below here and there. I want light to be showing through because, like I said, I'm trying to have a sky that is stormy, but not completely stormy. It has a sense of change happening, and that way I'm hoping to add some emotion to the painting, which the viewer will decide at different times whether that's a feeling of storm coming or storm leaving. Just quickly passing through. So I'm carefully making this Payne's Gray very watery, putting in some little bit of marks that are a little bit darker, but very watery, very light as the base of the clouds. And around her a little more light will be happening. Okay, so that's the start of that. And I'm not working wet on wet, I'm just working on dry paper. I don't stretch my paper, I just tape it down really well. And generally, if I have a good paper, I don't need to stretch it. I don't ever stretch it, actually. I like to leave my sizing on, and I also like in some ways I feel like I can lift color a little better, and I like to have the sizing stay on. And over here I'm just going to very lightly, with that same color, because I like to have the colors, just in case you've mixed your color special for this process, it's better to use them while they're mixed and ready. So I'm going to go my Payne's Gray is called Payne's Gray Blue Hue. So it comes this color, but as I said, it can be also mixed by taking ivory black, and I'm going to take a little more color in here and stretch out some water here, because I'm going to take a little bit of blue and drop some of that in. This is ultramarine blue, just dropping in some blue on top of that and in the watery areas here. And so I'm going to make that very, very light for now, okay? Just changing it to a little bit of blue because I like to have some diversity in that color, not to have just the Payne's Gray. I'm going to soften this edge here. There, a little more blue, ultramarine blue. And I'm shaping some cloud kind of shapes in here by dropping in the color, letting it diffuse like that. Because the clouds always have some shadows, but they're kind of soft, fluffy shadows. There. So I'm going to make those there. I don't want it too spotty, but it's the beginning. I'd like to let it and then I'm going to take a little cerulean blue and put that in the Payne's gray. That makes it a little bit brighter, a little bit of a brighter blue. And then I'm going to put just water over here, leaving a space. Okay, and I'm going to drop in that mixture, leaving a space. As if there's a cloud behind and some light between, and that cloud behind is a little brighter. And the clouds, as you know, they're constantly moving, they're constantly changing. And then I'm going to soften some of those edges. There. I'm going to leave that bright light. I like the fact that there's an indication, that there's light going on back there. Bring a little bit more of the ultramarine in and drop it in a few places. Okay, again, just to indicate that there's some shadowing going on. And that very softly, sorry, that very softly mixes, but I'm going to blend in a few edges here and let it softly mix like a big cotton ball. Clean this edge here. Make sure that there are no little speckles or bits of lint that have dropped anywhere, because the clouds shouldn't have any speckles in them. It's a bit more blue than what I'm really wanting. I will bring in some more grays later. But for now, I'll just continue with those blues. I'm going to come down here and bring some blues down here, as if there's another cloud up here. And I think I'll leave I won't leave a corner that is totally empty, but I'll just put a little bit of color in there. So this is the, and with some water, a little blending. And there's an indication that I actually have a light and white cloud there. I'll leave some white more, just lightly. Put some color up here, and then drop in. I'll drop in some darker color here and there. this blue up here is a little bit more dark. It's a combination of Payne's Gray and the ultramarine. And I'm going to continue that up here. I really did want that feeling of uncertainty about the what the sky is all about to be created. So I don't want to create a sky that is all bright, shiny blue. So I'm bringing some more Payne's Gray and some more ultramarine in here, and actually going to drop down some very dark colors there. And I'm doing it for two reasons. I like the idea of creating the lost edge with this cape and not having it be so starkly defined against the sky. And I'm just making this up as I go, doing what I think is needed for the painting. So I'm going to put some more water over here and drop in more of that color, leaving some areas light, some darker, but basically creating some dark color behind her. That creates a bit of a lost edge with her hood. Okay. Now I have to blend in this water here so I don't create a line in the fabric. Because the paint gets reconstituted and I can create a bloom and a mark there, which I don't want to have. So I'm just trying to make sure that that doesn't happen. Okay. And I have to be careful not to lift paint out. Here I might want to lift out a little bit of paint because it's a bit too dark against that sky. So since it's wet by the adjacent sky, I'll just soften it a bit. Lift a little color out, blend it. I can always come back in and do a little more on the hood. I'm just going to create a little diversity of the color there, so it's not such a strong hard edge there. Okay. And up here I'll just put in a little bit of bright blue. So there's a bright blue of the hood against the slightly more gray blue of the sky. And here you can see a bloom starting to be created if I'm not careful. But sometimes just a little bit of scrumbling and by the creation of the texture, it'll remedy that and actually create some diversity in that wash that I had from before. So, there are always little remedies that one has to do in this dance with the watercolor when it decides to come in and fiddle with what you've already put down. So I'm taking a little dry brush here and putting that there. And I've got some marks here and some marks there, a bit scrumbling. Okay. I can come back in and do a little more with that later. Now I'm going to take some more of that Payne's Gray, mix some ultramarine in it. I want a little more dark down in here, and I'm going to take the chance of fiddling with that. And blending it. And that, to me, it creates a little better balance. I don't want to lose the nice soft edges that I put in over here, but I can build a little bit of color adjacent to it and create a little more change in value, a little more dark. You can see a little bit of a bloom creating here, but that might actually work to our benefit, so I'll put in a little more color and let that happen. I won't control it for now. It's because the paper was still wet, but okay, so you can see how I'm building up this sky and trying to create some feeling of emotion for the viewer. A little bit of dry brush down here. Doing a little bit of dry brush in the bottom of the sky here. You get these little lines of distant clouds. Want them across the whole sky, but just in some places. And I'm going to put a little more of that dark color down in here. Create some depth to that cloud here. And a little more definition of the cloud over here. Again, just dotting in some color, letting it blend in by itself. A little bit more, letting it blend in a few spots up here. And now that this is drying over here, maybe a slight amount more in this area here. This is a brighter blue here, just the ultramarine blue and cerulean blue mixed together. And I'll wipe with a damp brush the edge to blend it in. Softening some edges. I don't want to soften them all, just some of them. Over here, I don't want too much detail back here because it would be a distraction. from the front of her face, but I'll put in a little bit here and there. I'm just going to build that darkness down all the way. And softening it, making it a little less clear, but fairly dark behind her. And down here, we had the cascade green of the forest, and I'll just put a little bit more of that color, because now that it's dried lighter. I'll put that stuff down there too, so that that's not too much competing with the detail of the front, so there's not as much detail I don't want. I just want an indication of the landscape in the dark sky. I think that is maybe not done, but pretty close. So this is a good point to leave everything and wipe the edges and leave it to dry. I'll come back and I'll have to do some repair on the hood to blend it out a little bit. It's too diverse at this point, but that's a good stopping point, and then we'll just wrap it up later. Hi. I thought the camera was on, and then I realized just now that it wasn't. So I just want you to see that I've added some darks in here with Payne's Gray and Ultramarine Blue here and there. Deep in the sky, some pinks overlapping the blue to make a slight violet. That's a Opera Rose pink, which is a very light, bright pink. Just a little bit here, bringing in a little bit of Payne's Gray and Ultramarine Blue there, bringing in the final stages, a little more color in the hood where it had gotten messed up by my tweaking. And then I took a little bit of my toothbrush and created some texture on this hood so that it would have a little bit of diversity in the hood and not look so much like a big dark blob around her face. So I'm putting in a few speckles here and there. Did a little toothbrush work here and there. And just put in a little bit more here and there. A little bit more texture there, because it's very wet and it's not quite drying the way I'd like. I've got an edge here that is diffusing because it's wet, so I'm going to just take my paper towel and lift up the paint in that area so it's not, so it's dry and it doesn't keep bleeding into the background. Just going around the edge to dab so that it doesn't bleed into the sky. I don't mind a little bit of a soft edge, but that's bleeding just a bit too much. There. Hi, little puppies. Yeah. So I think that this painting is done. We'll let it dry, and at the most it would need just maybe a little bit more speckling and diversity in the hood fabric so that it's not quite so dull. So boring. A little bit, some dots of color here and there, like impressionism in a sense. So we don't have any enormous flat areas of color. Not that they're wrong to have the flat areas of color, but I just prefer them not to be too much, like over here a little bit of. So that's the kind of additional here a little bit in this area of the Payne's gray on top of the violet to make that shadow a little bit more interesting, not just a big line. There. I like having texture here and there in my colors, in my washes. I think that helps a little bit. Also makes the face pop a little bit more by having some speckles of dark near her, but not just a big dark line. Okay, let's call this thing done. All right, I hope you enjoyed the process, and I will try to contain myself from doing any off-camera tweaking. Oops, one more area of tweaking needed. The shoulder. Yeah. Okay. There we go. Thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoyed the process. And thank you for putting up with my occasional puppy and dog barking. Take care. Bye.